Las Vegas, mid-1970s. The king had just launched into Can't Help Falling in Love. But before the second verse, he froze. Down near the stage rail, a young woman was shaking, her hands gripping the barrier. The lights caught her face. Elvis stopped singing. 20,000 people waited silent. Moments like this remind us why. Elvis wasn't just a performer, he was human. If you believe music can change lives in a single second, stay with me, because this story will stay with you. The year was the mid-1970s. Vegas was alive with neon and cigarette smoke, the Strip pulsing like it never slept. Inside one of its grand showrooms, 20,000 people had gathered. Shoulder to shoulder, programs rustling in restless hands. The air carried the faint scent of spilled whiskey, perfume, and the hum of anticipation. Elvis Presley was center stage, dressed in a white suit that caught the light like fire. The opening notes of Can't Help Falling in Love rang out, strings gliding across the room. The orchestra swelled, brass polished to a shine, the sound system pushing every note through a hiss of amplifiers. Fans clutched cameras, hearts, and scarves, ready to capture the night they'd waited years to witness. Elvis stepped to the microphone, his baritone smooth, steady, but then he stopped. The band faltered for a beat, strings dragging over the silence. One of the violinists looked up, confused. Ushers in dark suits froze mid-step along the aisles. People thought maybe it was part of the act, but it wasn't. Elvis had lowered his microphone, his gaze locked on someone in the front rows. There she was, a young woman, early 20s. Her hands gripped the stage rail so tightly her knuckles whitened. Her shoulders shook, her breath uneven, almost desperate. Some say you could see her lips moving, whispering to herself. Though the sound was swallowed by the silence of the arena, at her feet a cardboard sign leaned against the barrier. Black letters, uneven but bold. I came alone. Please notice me. The crowd stirred. A murmur rippled from one side of the room to the other. Was she fainting? Was she in danger? A few in the balcony leaned forward, straining to see that Elvis didn't sing. He didn't move back. He stepped forward instead, slowly, one hand raised to the orchestra. The band obeyed instantly, notes dying mid. The silence that followed felt louder than any applause. Every camera, every eye, every breath in the room was fixed on him and her. Witnesses recall hearing nothing but the faint buzz of the lights overhead and the rustle of someone's program falling to the floor. The woman clutched her chest, trembling, unable to look away. Her face flushed with fear or maybe disbelief that Elvis Presley, the man she had worshipped from posters and vinyl records, had frozen an entire arena just for her. Security shifted near the rail, uncertain. Their radios crackled with whispers. Do we move in? Is she all right? But before they could act, Elvis made his decision. He tilted his head slightly, eyes steady, then motioned with his hand. Not to the guards, not to the ushers, to his band. Stop. The musicians, veterans of hundreds of shows, knew the signal. They put down their bows, muted their horns. A ripple of unease ran through the audience. When Elvis Presley stops mid-song, something is wrong or something unforgettable is about to happen. People leaned forward. Parents hushed children. Couples squeezed each other's hands. 20,000 people balanced on the edge of silence, waiting for a cue, a word, a sound. Elvis bent slightly at the waist, his chest rising and falling with a controlled breath. His microphone was lowered, but his presence filled the room. In that instant, the stage wasn't a stage, was a bridge between a man and a single fan who seemed too fragile to stand. The crowd didn't yet know what would happen. They expected a smile, maybe a quick wave, before the show resumed. But that's not what they were about to see, because Elvis Presley, in that moment, wasn't the king of rock and roll. He wasn't a performer bound by the set. He was a man who had noticed a soul in distress, and he wasn't about to ignore it. What he chose to do next would silence the crowd, in a way no song ever could. The silence deepened, thick as velvet. Then Elvis moved slow, deliberate. He didn't retreat from the edge of the stage. Instead, he lowered himself onto one knee, white bell-bottoms folding neatly as the rhinestones on his suit caught the spotlight and flickered like tiny stars. The orchestra sat motionless, instruments still raised. The audience leaned forward, trying to hear, trying to understand. Elvis tilted his microphone away and spoke softly, but his voice carried, resonant even without the full amplification. "You okay, honey?" Gasps rippled across the rows. Fans in the balcony whispered to each other. Some say you could hear a woman cry out faintly, "Oh my God, he's talking to her." The young woman didn't answer. Her lips parted, but nothing came. She shook her head once, trembling harder now, her hair falling over her face as she clung to the rail. Two security men started forward, heavy shoes pounding on the carpet near the front row. The audience tensed. Was she about to be carried out? Elvis raised his hand, palm out. The movement was firm, commanding. No words needed. The guards froze. The king had spoken without speaking. The crowd gasped again. Never in a Vegas showroom had 20,000 people been so silent. The hiss of the amplifiers filled the air like static in a storm. Somewhere in the rafters, a spotlight creaked as it adjusted. Then Elvis did something no one expected. He turned slightly and motioned upward with two fingers. The spot operator understood immediately. Within seconds, the blinding white cone that had pinned the young woman dimmed, softening to a gentle glow. The harsh glare faded. Her shaking shoulders eased just slightly under the calmer light. The arena seemed to exhale. Still kneeling, Elvis reached to his waist. From the wide belt that cinched his suit, he pulled a silk scarf, pure white, edges glimmering under the softened glow. He let it dangle between his fingers, swaying gently above the heads of the first row. The fan covered her face with both hands. Her body folded forward as if she might collapse, overcome not by fear anymore, but by the weight of the moment. Elvis extended the scarf lower, closer, his wrist loose but steady. His voice carried again, quiet, deliberate, almost tender. "This is for you." The crowd erupted into gasps, some clapping once before silencing themselves again. It was no longer a concert, it was something sacred. But the young woman didn't reach. Not yet. She froze, torn between awe and disbelief. Her knees bent slightly, unsteady, as if she might fall before she could take what was being offered. And so the tension thickened. Thousands of people leaned forward. Some whispered, "Take it." Others just watched, hands pressed over their mouths. The scarf dangled between them, swaying in the charged air. Elvis didn't rush her. He waited, eyes locked, patient. Would she find the strength to reach out? Or would the moment slip away in front of 20,000 silent witnesses? Her hand finally rose. It shook violently, fingers trembling as if they barely obeyed her. The scarf brushed her fingertips. The fabric caught against her skin, soft and impossibly light. Elvis didn't let go immediately. He held it there, suspended, their hands inches apart. His eyes met her steady, calm, grounding her in a way no spotlight ever could. The arena held its breath. Ushers stood motionless at the aisles. The brass section of the band stared down at their music stands, instruments forgotten. 20,000 strangers waited on one fragile connection. Then, with a slow exhale, the fan's hand closed around the scarf. The audience gasped in unison, a wave of sound quickly swallowed by the hush. Elvis gave a small nod, as if to say, "You're safe now." But he wasn't finished. Still kneeling, Elvis raised his other hand toward the orchestra. A single gesture to fingers. The conductor caught it, and one low chord hummed softly through the speakers, just enough to hold the room. Elvis brought the microphone close again. But he didn't sing the full verse. He didn't belt it out like the record. Instead, he leaned closer to the fan, his voice quiet, intimate, yet strong enough to reach the back row. "Take my hand. Take my whole life," to just one line. The words floated through the hush, heavier than any chorus, more powerful than the biggest finale. It wasn't for the crowd. It was for her. And yet, somehow, it belonged to everyone. Tears fell across the arena. Some say grown men pressed handkerchiefs to their eyes. Women clutched each other's arms. Couples held tighter. The moment turned a showroom into a chapel. The fan's lips trembled as she mouthed the words back, scarf pressed to her face. For the first time since Elvis had stopped the song, her shoulders steadied. Her breathing slowed, shallow but calmer. Elvis gave the faintest smile. Just a flicker. A flash of humanity in the middle of a spectacle. The orchestra shifted, waiting for their cue to resume. But Elvis didn't give it. He let the silence stretch, the single line still hanging in the air like smoke. In that suspended moment, people weren't fans and he wasn't a star. They were just human beings, sharing one fragile instant of understanding. Finally, Elvis rose, pushing himself up with the grace of someone who had done this 1,000 times, though never like this. He turned slightly toward the crowd, still holding the microphone low. The hush remained. He could have launched back into the song, let the show roll on. But he didn't. Instead, he stood tall, scarf gone from his hands, gaze lingering one last second on the trembling young woman. The audience thought it was over, but Elvis wasn't done, proving that this night would never be forgotten. The orchestra finally eased back into rhythm, hesitant at first, then flowing into the next song. But Elvis didn't join them right away. He stood at the edge of the stage, microphone lowered, still watching as the young woman sank back into her seat, scarf pressed tightly against her chest. From the back rows, people could see her shoulders shaking again. Now it looked less like fear and more like release. She was crying, the kind of cry that shakes you free after holding everything in for too long. Elvis leaned slightly toward a stagehand crouched in the wings. Witnesses recall seeing him whisper quickly, pointing subtly in her direction. The stagehand nodded and vanished backstage, nearly tripping in the rush. The show carried on, though the energy had shifted. Every song, every note now felt like it carried a deeper current. Audience members whispered between numbers, replaying what they had just seen. Some scribbled in programs, desperate to capture the words before memory could blur them. 10 minutes later, while Elvis launched into a driving rendition of Burning Love, a quiet ripple moved through the aisles. Two ushers in dark suits approached the young woman, but instead of removing her, they invited her. With gentle gestures, they guided her down toward the side stairs. The crowd parted like water, murmurs following her every step, and then she was gone, disappearing beneath the stage. Out of sight. When she reappeared, it was intermission. She sat near the side stairs, just feet away from the stage she had once clung to in terror. In her lap now rested a bouquet of white roses, their fragrance rising sweet and fresh against the haze of cigarette smoke that still clung to the air. Tucked inside the bouquet was a folded note. Written in Elvis's unmistakable hand, it read, "No one should ever feel alone here. EP." Some witnesses swear she pressed the note to her lips before tucking it back into the flowers. Others recall her shoulders shaking as she buried her face in the petals, tears streaking her cheeks. The crowd buzzed during the break. Strangers whispered across rows, "Did you see what he did? Did you see the flowers?" For many, it felt like they weren't just watching a concert anymore. They were part of a living story, one that would be retold for years. When the show resumed, Elvis sang with renewed force, his voice cutting through the showroom like a blade of light. But the energy wasn't only about the music. The audience knew every word, every note was carrying more than entertainment. It was carrying compassion by the end of the night. The young woman was still seated, bouquet in her lap, scarf clutched to her chest. She didn't leave when the final bow came. She didn't leave when ushers began clearing the aisles. She remained there, rooted in the seat Elvis had chosen for her, as if afraid that moving would break the spell. And yet, what happened days later, far from Las Vegas, far from the stage, would prove that Elvis's gesture didn't end with the roses. The lights of Las Vegas faded into memory as the young woman returned home days later. For most fans, the concert would live only in photographs, in tickets tucked into scrapbooks, in fading echoes of applause. But for her, the story wasn't finished. According to reports, a package arrived at her doorstep less than a week later. The box was plain, unmarked, delivered quietly as if it carried something ordinary. But inside was anything but ordinary. She opened it slowly, hands still unsteady. On top lay a single envelope. The handwriting was instantly recognizable, broad, looping strokes she had seen countless times on records and magazines. Her breath caught. She opened it. The note inside read, "You'll always have a place with us. Elvis." Beneath it lay a ticket, not dated, not for one night only, a front row seat. No expiration. It wasn't just a souvenir. It was a promise. Family members later shared that she never used it. She never sold it. She framed it, untouched, the ink and paper preserved behind glass. For the rest of her life, it hung on her wall, a daily reminder of the moment she went from trembling in fear to standing in the center of kindness. For her, it wasn't about the music anymore. It was about being seen, truly seen in a world that often passed her by. And for the 20,000 people who had been in that Las Vegas showroom, the memory of Elvis stopping everything lived on as a story retold at kitchen tables, in fan clubs, in interviews. Some say that when they closed their eyes, they could still hear that one line sung in silence. "Take my hand, take my whole life too." That night wasn't just a concert. It was proof that even at the height of fame, with cameras flashing and an empire of eyes on him, Elvis Presley chose compassion over spectacle. The king's voice could fill a room. But in that moment, his silence said more. Stories like this still surface decades later. small acts of kindness preserved in memory as fiercely as his greatest songs. Fans remember the music, but they cherish the man who noticed a trembling fan and turned fear into courage. Greatness isn't just measured in the songs sung or the stages filled. Sometimes it's measured in the quiet choice to see someone when no one else does. If this story touched you, share it with someone who believes kindness can stop a room. And tell me in the comments, what's the one act of compassion you've witnessed that still echoes in your heart today?